Hey everyone, you know what time it is. Well, you'd be right, it's lunchtime, but I was thinking something. You would also be right, it's time to like and subscribe. But what I was really getting at is it's time for another Sandia Mountain Natural History Center quick trip. Today, we're on the peak of Cerro Grande in Bandelier National Monument. Cerro Grande has awesome views, and it's a great place to look at some forest fire evidence. Cerro Grande is closely associated with two of New Mexico's most notorious forest fires. The Cerro Grande fire in 2001, which actually burned its way down into Los Alamos and burned about 400 structures. And the Los Conchas fire, which burned about 156,000 acres, and at the time was New Mexico's largest forest fire. So let's head out and explore Cerro Grande. For the second hike in a row, we have mule deer. He's a little bit in the shadows. We saw another one, he ran off the other way. There he is, he's moving. Yeah, the second hike in a row we've gotten mule. So if we look down the slope here, we see a bunch of old growth ponderosa trees that have survived the fire. One of the reasons that they survived the fire is their spacing. Ponderosas should actually be in a healthy situation 20 to 50 per acre. But in many parts of New Mexico, we are up to 500 and 1,000 per acre, which creates a very hazardous fire situation. Because if these trees are open or in the open like this one, or these right here, their crowns are not touching. Should they get struck by lightning and burn, they will not burn the entire forest down. Later we're going to see what we call a dog hair thicket of ponderosa that did not survive the fire because of their proximity to each other. So this is a good example of that dog hair thicket type forest. It may not look too bad now, but notice on the ground how many trees have fallen. This fire occurred in 2001, so a lot of these trees have fallen now. But imagine all those trees standing. It carries fire very, very well. And once fire gets into the tops of the trees, it's called a crown fire, and it is very, very difficult to stop. So these ponderosa trees are really well adapted to survive fire, and we can see that this one has in fact survived the fire that was here. So some of the ways that they can survive the fire is this bark. You can see that this bark is about 1.5 inches thick, and in spots it's even thicker. The other thing that the bark does is it's an exfoliating bark, meaning it flakes off. So when this catches on fire, it heats up and it flakes off. That's taking the heat away, and it's also taking the fire away. So the bark has a lot to do with helping the tree survive. These long needles hold a lot of moisture, so that keeps them from burning. And then also, every time the tree survives a fire, the crown of the tree is pushed up. So you may notice that there's very few branches down low. That helps the tree survive because the fire can't climb those branches and get into the crown. And finally, it has very deep roots. So those deep roots, deep under the ground, are obviously insulated by the soil and protected from fire. So looking out here, if you can see all that brown, that is the Los Conchas burn scar. Los Conchas fire was started near the Los Conchas trailhead by a downed power line. It burned 43,000 acres in the first day. That is more than an acre a second. It eventually burned over 156,000 acres. Fires here in New Mexico are still a very common occurrence, but believe it or not, there was a time where they were much more common. Prior to the 1880s, fire in forests like this, ponderosa forests, would have come through about every 10 years, sometimes more than once a decade. But in the 1880s, grazing and livestock came in, and the livestock eats all the grass, or at least eats the grass down. And once that grass is eaten down, it can't carry fire as well. The other thing that happened was starting in 1910, the Forest Service thought it would be a good idea to have a policy that they would extinguish all fires by 10 a.m. the next day. And they were extremely successful in that. So that took a lot of fire out. And as we've since come to learn, fire is actually an important and needed part of our ecosystem. There are a lot of fun and unusual things you can do in the woods or out in nature, and Daniel has one of the more unusual ones. So we're going to do a 360 from up here, but these 360s often don't do it justice. We can see very, very far, a large portion of northern New Mexico. The town down below is Los Alamos. Come across looking back towards probably the Pecos Wilderness. But one of the interesting things is if we zoom in here, we have Wheeler Peak, highest peak in New Mexico at over 13,000 feet. So this massive meadow down below is called the Valles Caldera, and it's the Valles Caldera National Preserve, actually, part of the national park system. But what many people don't realize about the caldera is it is exactly that, a caldera. It is part of a massive volcano. Volcano is so large that astronauts often use it as a marker from space to orient themselves where they are flying over Earth. Just came across some elk scat here on the side of the trail. You can tell elk scat mainly by the size. It's much bigger than deer. So this might be some uber nerdy ecology stuff, but this fence that we're looking at is actually an elk exclosure. It's a research project, and the goal here is to study the effects of grazing, mainly by elk, on the ecosystem. So if you look closely, and I'll come back around, there's a lot more diversity and more plants growing inside the exclosure than we see out here outside of the exclosure. So that's a real good way for scientists to learn about the impact of elk on the ecosystem. Well, we found a water source here with not the most appetizing water, but a ton of tracks all around it, mostly elk tracks. Coming down here to get a drink at this watering hole. Always an interesting find. Found a bone of some sort, maybe part of a pelvis or something. It's interesting how it's fractured here. That could be a lot of reasons. It could be fractured since it's been laying out here. It could have been fractured in the process of being killed. Who knows? It's always interesting to find a bone. People that have been watching our videos for a while
No, I love scat. It tells us so much about the animals. In this case, it's probably coyote, but the color tells us that the coyote has been eating mostly meat, because the phosphorus in the bones and the meat actually help turn the scat gray.